Hey, Peyton, nice to see you again on this beautiful day. And this time with a quote by Alan Watts again, where he said once, "No amount of anxiety makes any difference to anything that is going to happen." No amount of anxiety, Peyton. How do you relate to that? And what kind of recent examples can you find?
It's such a good reminder because it goes directly against the current of the implicit logic of our mind when we're caught in loops of worrying about the future. There's some kind of a logic underneath our anxiety, underneath our rumination and worrying about the future that on some level, a part of us, without ever necessarily thinking this explicitly in words, on some level, a part of us feels like we should be spending our time talking to ourselves in our mind about what can go wrong and what we need to do about it, about the risks and opportunities of the future. And some part of us feels like if we don't do this, that things will go worse. And some part of us feels like it is productive on some level, or that we should on some level feel this way. Yet when we inspect our experience, and fortunately, most of us have many data points on feeling this way about the future and seeing how it goes, we realize that the emotional weight of contraction, of struggle within our mind over the future doesn't actually serve us like it pretends to, which is interesting because a lot of times, if we're in a position where there are things that we are responsible for, maybe we're responsible for the livelihood of some other people that have placed their trust in us. Maybe we are responsible for some mission that we are a part of. There's some conditioning that we have, there's some baseline gravity that we have to carry the weight of the future on our shoulders and to sometimes even be crushed underneath that weight and feel like that's the way that we should be given the responsibilities that we have. But the truth is, finding flow with intention, without blinding ourselves, without denying anything about the future, and sometimes with making a plan for the future, of course, but finding flow within all that instead of being crushed and contracted underneath it. This is where our highest agency is, actually. This is where we can best shape the future. And the anxiety that we feel, that we suffer from, doesn't actually, it's not actually a necessary ingredient in moving the future how we want. After all these years, finally, what do you think about this? Why do we slip into this anxiety about the future? And how can we feel this too? That on some level, I don't actually need to feel this way for the future to go just as well.
It's a good point you're making. It's about agency. It's not about a state of how we feel. It's not about introspection. It is about moving things and moving ourselves in the world, which presents itself to us in the way it presents itself to us. We could even say it is like a river, and we are on a boat floating down the river of time. Yes, there may be pathways where we have to decide, do we go this way or that way? And then we make the decision and life flows further. And sometimes we get into streams and eddy currents and whirlwinds. And then after this part of our life, it's a calm river again. And so whatever is going to happen is going to happen. You can think of it like that, that there is some amount of things that are just not in our control. But there's other amounts which are in our control. And it is not per se that anxiety doesn't make any difference. It is the way we apply anxiety to things which are only outside of our control that is not going to change anything. Anxiety can be even our ally, but only up to a certain point, and to a certain amount of anxiety focused on the right domain of things we can control and we can act on and we can have agency about. So it is about a discernment whether we can act on things or not, which makes anxiety productive or not. And most of the time, as you said, it's not a necessary ingredient in living just as well, doing just as fine. But when it comes to high stakes situation where your life maybe depends on it, where you're like just walking on a tightrope, then anxiety prepares you maybe for having better measures of endurance and measures of security, which you take on the journey before you take the first step, for example. During your precarious act on just walking on a tightrope, then you should not feel the anxiety anymore because you only will not benefit from it. It may even put you into harm's way even more. So finding calm and flow, like you said as well, in the situations which have high stakes is the way to go to really act and really apply your agency. Worry about it just a little bit before, and then you will have a good amount of preparation. And when you have the preparation, and you can just engage in what is here right now, and then you probably even perform better without the introspection of a loop of anxiety because you are in a calm state and a well-rested mind. Peyton, how do we discern between what is preparation, uh, where is maybe the effort of thinking about things and preparing for things worth the weight of the anxiety, and where doesn't where doesn't it make any sense?
A
Or
lot
how
of things come to mind. One piece of that is that you gestured toward is that sometimes anxiety is a signal, kind of like sometimes anger is a signal that some boundary is needed. And so, even though we don't want to swim in the waters of anger for a week at a time, it might be important for us to listen to this anger in the moment that it's arising to see what it is trying to tell us. Or if I feel this way and then I try to repress it and then I feel it burst up again and then I try to repress it and I feel it burst up again and it doesn't seem to go away, even though I'm not actively stoking it. Maybe there's a part of me that knows something that I'm trying not to listen to, and I need to hold up and sit and open to what this is trying to tell me and open to this full feeling. So with anxiety, for example, there was a time, I don't know, maybe a couple of months ago where I was feeling a lot of excitement about my business and I was feeling a lot of anxiety too, a worry about it. And this feeling of it kind of underneath the surface where I was in this kind of roller coaster of emotions and up and then I felt this sort of nagging thing underneath the surface and then it would sort of burst out and then I would try to a part of me unconsciously would try to cover it up with visions and hope and good. And then it just felt like it was under there trying to burst through. And when I sat with it and I felt it, what I realized is like, yes, the excitement and the vision, these are good. These are true. These are helpful. However, this voice of worry, it was actually trying to signal something important to me. It told me that, hey, I actually do need to step back and make a financial plan that accounts for the contingencies of things not going as I plan in advance. I actually need to be deliberate and dedicate time and create a financial model and to run the numbers and to think about the various scenarios and what I would do in advance before it's too late to do anything about it. And so that anxiety was trying to tell me something. And I actually, when it was trying to bust out under the surface, I needed to listen to that part of me that was trying to signal something important that it had learned in the past, the honest way. And so there can be something to it. And then once I did listen to it, once I heard the signal, then it actually did serve me to allow it to subside, not by trying to cover over it. I think there's a good strategy and a bad strategy in terms of the fruit of this. And like trying to repress it, trying to shout over it, trying to I think a lot of times when we feel anxiety, we cover over it with fear or with anger rather. We almost want to project onto others this source and we want to feel strong instead of vulnerable. And so the anger can give us this short-term feeling of power. And so we might want to cover over it with that. We might want to cover over it with desire and feeling this vision of the future and all that I want and imagining of having it and trying to cover over it in that way. Maybe even it can give us temptations of pride and grandiosity because we're trying to run away from this feeling of vulnerability that we feel, and it also can cause us to just be avoidant, to just try to distract ourselves, and all of these are natural responses that will occur at times along our journey. And the truth is, this talking past anxiety of it makes no difference to what's going to happen. On some level, that's an important truth for us to hear and for us to recognize and for us to understand. But that doesn't mean that all strategies of getting past or getting through or covering up anxiety are valuable strategies or sustainable strategies. A lot of them are unsustainable, and unsustainable strategies when we're not actually opening ourselves to feeling what we're feeling, when we actually feel an energy in our body and then we try to shove it down, or there's a part of us that we're trying to exclude from the group and we're trying to avoid it or shout over it or repress it. These are not sustainable strategies. In my experience and in observing others too, and in reading, it just doesn't seem to work well. It seems like it might work covering it up or avoiding it in the short term, but it doesn't subside and eventually is going to be a dormant volcano that erupts and bursts forth and causes us more difficulty because it doesn't, if we don't give it any outlet, then it will burst and it won't be necessarily a good time or in a good balance and a good, it won't be a controlled forest fire. It will be one where the forest hasn't burned in 50 years and now it's unstoppable, maybe. Who knows? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. And
Mhm.
so it's not like we have the option of this arising or not arising. Or at least I don't think that I'll ever live a decade without ever feeling this emotion arising. Or I don't think that's true for many people. But it's optional if we want to stay in these waters forever. And if we resist it, it persists. If we open ourselves to it, then it can flow. We can hear what it has to give us. It can deliver the goods that it is meant to deliver, or it can reveal itself in a way that actually we can learn to work with it. We can learn to integrate it. We can learn to show it that this thing we experienced 5 years ago, where you still think we're in this survival situation, we're not there anymore. Let's open to this together. You're welcome. We can feel you, and we can look at what is new, what is actually in front of us, the reality here that our system might be reacting in a pretty extreme way to. And in opening to it, then we can actually flow with it, we can integrate it, and it doesn't become as much of an untamable beast of a problem and this and that. And so, and we can listen to it and recognize that we don't have to live here in order to operate well. And in fact, it's helpful for our flow if we can hear it and it can help give us some direction, and then we can come back to wholeness rather than being divided and scattered, which is what anxiety can really do to us. What
Mhm.
do you think about this nuance here of like maybe the way through anxiety is not from trying to cover our eyes to how we feel. It's not to denying how we feel. What is a wise way to ride the waves as it relates to these emotions?
Well, a lot of books have been written about this so far. One that comes to mind when we talk is Norman Vincent Peale's book, The Power of Positive Thinking, which is not all the way about positive thinking, but about how to apply your thinking and how to apply your mind to situations which can be worrisome or dire. Yeah, there's a healthy amount of visualization within a visualization of how can it become so that it will be good in the end. And then working backwards from this visualization and actually do something about it. And it is also about um, not being too introspective and doing some work out or walk around the block with this example of this sad man who wanted to take his life. And then the doctor said, okay, you are not allowed to take your life until you walk 5 times around this block. And after he
Yes.
walked 5 times around the block, he wasn't actually happy again because he moved his body. That's sometimes a trap we can fall into. If we are too busy, we only sit around and are busy working, and then we are working ourselves into the ground, or we do not apply ourselves enough. And then we too busy sitting with ourselves only. But we need an equally amount of activity, of application, of social interaction, anything which we as a species came along with anything that helped our species to survive. We are creatures not only of the mind, but also of the body and of the spirit. And we need to nourish our parts and pieces and communities likewise. Probably is a good way to take the whole picture into account. Not only your problems, not only the ways you want to think about things and interpret it differently, whatever happened to you in the past. Yeah, if you analyze yourself with the psychologist, maybe you end up with a 500-page book about yourself, but you still need to do the work and resolve it right here, right now. So
Yeah.
it is a point of diminished return if you dive too much into yourself versus not doing anything about it. So another heuristic which comes to mind is just listen to our grandmothers and what they have to say.
Mm.
Maybe maybe our mother, when she says, "Okay, put on some socks because it's cold," and it's not too dumb of a thing. Maybe it's only marginal improvement, but sometimes it's very smart. And the same applies to, okay, don't only sit in front of your computer. Also go outside, go up the mountains, go meet some friends. And this is a very helpful reminder, which need to tap into a support network of people who remind us of the most basic things, but the most important things. Because sometimes I forget the most basic things and how helpful they are to get the big things done. Because you need a baseline of nourishment to be able to invest the energy in the thing you think is big. Sometimes we think the thing is big and then it becomes a lion of terror. But if we approach it right, it is actually just an ant of equanimity.
Mm.
And we can
Mm.
transform it, and our mind has the power to transform it, depending on the way we perceive it. We look at it and we build a social network around it, or a network of heuristics, mental models, and people, resources we can tap into. What are your favorite resources, Peyton, to tap into?
Man, you've thought so many thoughts. I really, so to start off with what you said about the body, and I'll talk about the resources tapping into with the body. This I think is so easy to overlook that actually we are not a brain in a vat. Well, I don't know. We probably
Maybe
not a brain in a vat.
not only.
Not merely a brain and a vat, but we are a body mind. We are a whole animal. We're a system. We're 98% chimp. And so our emotions are not, they're not just in these 3 pounds of meat. They're in these 200 pounds of meat and, or 90 kilos or whatever you Europeans would say.
Yeah.
And if you think about a lion walking out on the savannah, an apex predator, how many lions have you ever seen with anxiety? Think about all the lions you've ever seen. How many lions have you ever seen with anxiety? We too are apex predators. Oh, you've seen one?
Like only in the meme which I saw today where a lioness bit the balls of the lion and he was like, this was the only one. But yeah, to your point, not any lion, not any other lion I saw.
Everyone's a lion until you get bit in the balls. But I've except for so with one exception, I've never seen a lion that's ever been anxious. And we too are apex predators, and we forget it. I walk around the forest at night. I don't have to fear anything. The things run away from me. I fear
Yeah,
nothing. I walk at night all the time. I can't
yeah,
even see. We
yeah.
are apex predators, but we don't feel that way. Because in my opinion, at least in large part, I think and think and think. I've thought myself out of happiness 1 million times, but never once into it. That's not my
Yeah.
own quote. That's from Jonathan Safran Foer. But it's thinking actually is upstream of how we feel in a way that we often forget.
Mm,
Actually, it's and we can claim such a greater agency over our mental states by claiming agency over our thinking. And this is deeply tied with the original quote of Alan Watts in the sense that our rumination about the future is not actually merely an effect that's downstream from the world as it is. There's actually a ton of ways that we can think about the exact same situations, that we can frame the exact same situations. And so we should be really intentional about what are our habits of mind and treat them as something that we have agency over. If we just have a low agency mentality over the thoughts that go on in our mind, we will be forever at the whims of whatever the junk is that goes on in our brains, and we won't be able to get off the ride, honestly. But in claiming agency over our thoughts and recognizing that our thoughts kind of do have the power to put us in a prison made of clouds if we let them. And then we must recognize that this prison is actually made of clouds and not of steel. And
Mm,
we have to wake up a little bit and recognize that actually our own mental thoughts are upstream of the anxiety that we sometimes feel. And sometimes the way out, and this is news to me about every week when I forget this, the
yeah.
way out doesn't come from better thinking and better figuring it out. And it's not that the way out of anxiety is to get to the bottom of it. A lot of times we need to wake up a little bit. We need to see again. We need to hear again. We need to unify, feel our body, go on a walk. And so back to your original question of what are the resources? Freaking nature. Go outside and see
Yeah.
some trees and go for a run, chase a turkey in the forest and climb some shit and slip and fall on a log crossing the stream. You will unify with your whole system. You will feel like the animal that you are. You will feel like a unified system again if you
Mm,
go out in nature like an animal does. Also,
mhm,
resources of just going on a walk in the neighborhood, of going and getting a workout, of feeling energy course through your whole body, however it aligns with your own system and preferences, whatever feels natural to you. The body is key. The breath also is always with us. The breath never leaves us.
mhm.
I was feeling not long ago a lot of anxiety, and I was even writing a poem of like it. I forget what I even said, but it was something like it feels like there is a torrent and I can't go on struggling to breathe. And then I said, but yet breath is still here. And
Mm,
always in our deepest anxiety, in our deepest torment of our heart, when we are in our darkest place, if we pay attention, our breath is always with us. And our breath is not separate from our spirit. These are one word in Greek, in Aramaic, in Hebrew. Breath
mhm.
and spirit are unified. Our breath flows through us and we can't hold on to it. And we receive it anew in every moment. Our greatest resource to calm our system, to come back to the moment, to ground in the now, to ground in reality. This is the ultimate resource, and it is always here, no matter where we are, no matter what we have, no matter what gets taken away from us, no matter what fears of us become true. We will always have our breath. We can always come back to our breath. Our breath is a place where we can find our true home. This is how we can find our own nature. This is how we can come back to the flow of reality. It is an anchor that is a great gift and blessing that we have. And the last thing I'll say is you're absolutely right in terms of connection with others, connection with our spirit, connection with the source. This gives us a safety net. Oftentimes, our deepest anxiety comes in a state of isolation, and it doesn't feel like what we want or need is connection with others. But oftentimes, this is the medicine that can make all of the ups and downs of our path have a bit of a sense of safety to them, a bit of a sense of a net that will catch us, even if the things we don't want will happen, because they might. The things that we don't want might happen. Actually,
Yeah,
that's not the cure to anxiety is not
that's
controlling
the
the
deal.
universe. That's the deal. That's the deal. And we must trust that even if those things happen, that we will be fine. We will still
Mhm.
have our breath. We will still have our connection with the source. And actually, things will regenerate, things will restore, new possibilities will open. The way forward is trust. What do you think about any intentions or final thoughts out of all this?
That's a beautiful recap you gave there. And just want to add that when I felt anxiety last week, I used a breathing method, which instantly, after 3 applications of 1 round, calmed down the body and the mind. So it is actually very powerful. To be reminded that the things we know should work but don't do, it has the same effect as if we wouldn't know even the things would work. So it is in our responsibility to actually act upon what we know about what helps us to calm down, what helps us to reintegrate into our whole system. And Yeah, it's just like 4 seconds you breathe in, 7 seconds you hold, and then you breathe out for 8 seconds and do 3 rounds of that very consciously. And then you're reset just like that. And so powerful to be reminded and then to act upon it. So, with that, my intention for this week is to use what I already have to make the best emotional state possible with enough sleep, with good nutrition, with good exercise, with good movement. And then this is my intention.
Beautiful, man. For me, it is to breathe deeply and it is to honor the connections that give us this safety net in the storm. Our spirit connection, our connection with those we love, and our connection with nature.
Awesome.
Thank you, my friend. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise, with that, see you next week.
See you next week. Bye bye.